Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give everybody a few seconds to sign in and get logged on. Are y'all seeing my note side? Sorry. Good. Just a few housekeeping. So far, we've got about half the folks logged in, so I'll let everybody give some time. We will start at about 12:03, just so everybody can get in on the call. Okay, everyone, welcome. We're here for Applying Green Communities to Rural America, and this is a webinar to introduce those who are our rural partners to the Green Communities criteria for 2020 that just came out this year. A couple of housekeeping notes as, let me see. As we move forward, the webinar is being recorded. You should have seen that or heard that when you first logged in. All audience members are muted when you log on, and we can't see you, but you can see us. Please use your chat feature to submit questions during the presentation, or should you have any kind of troubleshooting questions for me or for Adrian, who's on the call as well. I'm Robin Wolf. I'm the Senior Program Director for Rural Housing, and I'm joined by my colleague, Adrian Norwood, on the Rural Native American Program team. We are helping to host this webinar and host our colleagues on the Green Communities team. All of us are part of Enterprise Community Partners. And Enterprise Community Partners is an organization nationally that is dedicated to creating opportunity for low and moderate income people to access affordable housing in diverse and thriving communities. The Rural and Native American Program provides funding and training and technical assistance to organizations to help create safe, green, affordable housing in both rural and Native communities. So if you haven't heard from us yet, I'm excited to get a chance to meet you and for you to hear from us and from our colleagues here. And so I'm going to introduce Frederick and Krista Egger, my colleagues at Enterprise, who are leading our Green Communities efforts. So Frederick, you can, I think now, share your screen so that I don't have to have that, and I will also launch a poll as we move into that screen sharing that you'll see. Do you work mostly with rehab or new construction projects? And do you work mostly with multifamily or single family projects? So if you could answer those two questions for us, that would be great. It gives us an idea as we start this presentation of who we've got in the audience, what you're working on, what you're interested in, and a little bit more about you. We also have a question about, yeah, we're getting lots of answers, so keep on answering. I'll give you a couple more. We at least need to give you a full minute, so we'll give you at least 20 more seconds to get your answers in. Fantastic, it looks like most of you have answered now. Okay, so Adrian, can you share the poll results? Is that for everybody? They can see them? Yeah. So if you'll see, we've got 79% of the audience has experience with both new construction and rehab, and 13% mostly new construction, 8% just rehab. And then 50% of the audience has experience with both single family and multifamily, 33% multifamily only, and 17% single family only. So you have a mix of folks on the call and a mix of interests as we move forward. I would like to introduce Krista and Frederick. Krista Egger is the Vice President of National Initiatives at Enterprise Community Partners, and she manages Enterprise's national sustainability efforts. She's also led the technical development and public rollout of 2015 and 2020 Green Communities criteria, and provides oversight for the Enterprise Green Communities Certification Program, and leads the Health Action Plan framework, which pairs public health professionals with affordable housing development teams. And then Frederick is program officer on our national initiatives team, and he supports the national work around green communities and culture and creativity. He's passionate about sustainability within the built environment and has a Master of Science in Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management from the New School in New York. And I have heard recently that Frederick is now the unofficial face and voice of the Enterprise Green Community 2020 rollout. So I will turn this over to those two, and we'll get going. Thanks, guys.
Great, thanks so much, Robin. Really glad to be here. And one part of both Frederick and my bios that isn't publicly known, I suppose, is that we are both from rural areas. I grew up in rural South Georgia, and Frederick grew up in rural New York State. So really pleased to be with you all here today. And Frederick and I will be going back and forth over the next hour or so, sharing information on the 2020 criteria with you. So I'm going to move on to share our slide here that has the objectives for today's session. So by the top of the hour, we'll have discussed how to apply the 2020 Green Communities criteria in rural America, including sharing how we've redefined how our program considers rural areas. We'll also be highlighting different aspects of the 2020 criteria from the perspective of a rural project in terms of what's mandatory, what's optional, what's new, what's different. And we'll, at the end, be sharing different resources to assist you all with certification that you can look to after today's session is over. So let's start at the basics, though, and give you a little bit of the context of what and who Enterprise Green Communities is. So as Robin shared, Enterprise Community Partners is a national nonprofit organization in the affordable housing space. And Green Communities is a program of Enterprise Community Partners. We've been around about 15 years now. And our goal is to bring the benefits of sustainability to the affordable housing sector. Our Green Communities program is the only national green building program geared exclusively towards the affordable housing sector. And we aim to help create housing that's not just affordable to purchase or to rent or to operate, but housing that's also healthy, efficient, and environmentally responsible. So we do all of this, we achieve all of those goals within the cost constraints of the affordable housing market. And as Robin mentioned, we launched the most recent version of our Green Communities program this January. Over the years, over the last 15 years, we've had tremendous impact in working with affordable housers like yourself all across the country. So in the light blue and dark blue states that you see here on the map, we've had some kind of impact in the past. The darkest blue states are ones in which we not only have worked with housing teams on the ground on Green Communities certified projects, but those states also incentivize the use of our Green Communities certification program when they're making decisions about how to allocate their affordable housing finance. So we've had tremendous impact in partnership with you all. And although over the years, we've updated our Green Communities criteria a few times, you can see the covers of our previous manuals here. What everyone can rest assured of is that the content inside these, although it changes along with the covers every 4 or 5 years when it's updated, what's consistent are these guiding principles. So when we're creating the criteria, we're ensuring that it will be achievable for all affordable housing development types. So that's new construction, substantial moderate rehab, that's single family, low rise, mid rise, high rise. We're also ensuring that all of the measures in the program are cost effective and proven, that we're not using experimental techniques. We're also ensuring that all criteria are designed to deliver significant benefits, that they're technically sound and rigorous, and that they're measurable and verifiable. So the process that we used to create the 2020 criteria took about 18 months. It was intensely collaborative, and we started out by editing the 2015 criteria with revisions and updates and notes in response to all the questions that we'd received over the previous 5 years on the previous version of the standard. Then we confirmed what themes we would focus on with 2020 and moved through working with different working groups, which led to a public comment period late last year and then into design and publication. So here's the cover of the current version, the 2020 criteria. And there are 5 themes that we're really lifting up in this version that you can see in those circles at the top of your screen now. On the one hand, we are really prioritizing listening to the impacted community of projects to influence the project priorities through integrative design. We've developed strategies to drive down carbon emissions through a path to zero. We've doubled down on practices to improve resident health and well-being outcomes. We've broadened our approach to water, and we've strengthened our strategies relating to property resilience. And as you see at the bottom of the slide, we say that as a community of housing providers, we have an opportunity to make this vision our reality, simultaneously addressing today's affordability challenges and the impacts of our changing climate. So we're pleased to be on this journey with you all. And what I'm going to do now is actually share my screen to show you where we've located the Green Communities criteria online. And actually, I'll also drop this in the chat so that you'll be able to access it on your own if you would like. All right, so in the chat is the link to the site that you can see on my screen right now. And I just wanted to highlight a few different things for you here. So if you go to this site and scroll down, you'll see that on the right side of your screen, there's this navigation bar. If you click on any of these elements, you'll enter into the full content of our Green Communities criteria and see the requirements, the recommendations, resources, etc. In order to do that, it's important that you pay attention to these filters up top. There are slightly different versions of the criteria that you'll use depending on if you're in rural or urban. So you want to make sure that this rural button is selected, because with this in place, the ones that only relate to urban locations will be filtered out for you. And then similarly, you can pick between these filters at the top between new construction, substantial rehab, and moderate rehab. And depending on what you select there, you'll see different information here. So I wanted to highlight that for you. Also, if you'd rather just see a shorthand version of the program rather than the detailed requirements, you can click on checklist, where we have a few different versions of the material written in a different way. You can download one in Excel, you can look at a PDF, or down here in this content, you can see an interactive version of the checklist. So that's where to access the main materials. What I'd also like to call your attention to over here on the side is the appendices section. So if you click there, the first thing that you'll see in the appendices are definitions. So we define substantial and moderate rehab here, which you might want to take a look at depending on how your projects are classified. And then we define how we consider projects rural or not. We will consider a project following our rural pathway if any one of these 4 options is met. So this first definition of how you could be considered rural in the program is the same way that Enterprise considers projects rural for our Section 4 work. So the long story short is if you click on this link, you'll be able to determine by typing in your address whether or not you can comply. Other ways to be considered following the rural pathway in the program is if you're located on a Native American reservation, Hawaiian homestead, or land owned by Native Alaskans. The third way is if you're in a Kolinas community. And then the fourth is if you're eligible for funding under USDA Rural Housing Services. So I wanted to point this out for you all here. And then the last thing I'll show you before handing it over to Frederick and really getting into more of the content for the program is our templates. So if you click on the template section of this navigation bar, you'll be brought to a page that has hyperlinks to the different documents that you'll submit to us when you're creating an application for certification. So that's all of the detail that I wanted to share with you all right now. Remember, use these filters. I'll turn it over to Frederick now to really start diving into the content.
Thank you, Krista. Let me just get my slides up here for you all. And yes, and thank you, Robin, for that introduction in the beginning. Really appreciate it. I'm also very excited to be here. And just to get us started, today I'm going to take the next 20 or so minutes to review categories 1 through 4 of our criteria and highlighting some major changes between 2015 and 2020, and really explaining or expressing how they apply in our rural context here. So to get us started, to kick us off, in integrated design. So when we think about integrated design, we're thinking from resilience to water, health, and performance. Like whatever your project is going to be focused on, integrated design is really the backbone of our criteria. We know that implementing an integrated design process can determine the success of a project, and that this is only more critical in 2020 as the affordable housing industry reaches for greater performance in their projects, along with greater health and wellness benefits for residents and communities, all while maintaining project budgets. I'd like to just share a quick case example with you from some information that we had learned from a project team who was participating in our Intensive Integrated Design charrette, which is part of Enterprise's Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute. This partner shared that the integrative charrette pushed the development team to view their project with a more holistic approach, to reclaim their space and create a transformative impact on the community. And while initially struggling to meet the programmatic requirements and community needs for the project, after engaging in this holistic design process, the developer shared that they were able to focus way more on who they serve, which are the residents, and how they can make it better make it a better life for the people who inhabit the building. So the concept and general objectives of an integrative design process are the same in 2020 as previous iterations of the criteria, which is engaging in a holistic approach to pre-design by prioritizing information gathering and the residents and surrounding community experience, setting goals for building performance and resident health and comfort, and encouraging buy-in and accountability from project team members. So we know that community outreach is a priority for many affordable housing developers, and to support teams in engaging in a meaningful integrative design approach, we're amplifying this process with a more comprehensive activity and tool as part of the 2020 criteria. And this tool, as it is now known, is the Project Priority Survey, and it is the first requirement and a major change from previous iterations of the criteria. It should be completed prior to beginning your integrative design process. And this tool is really a measure to help provide teams with a holistic understanding of the context, place, and population you are serving. It'll help shape your priorities to drive project decisions and help garner project support and demonstrate need, while also serving as documentation for funding applications. Now jumping in to 1.2 and 1.4, you'll employ findings from the Project Priority Survey to execute effective meetings for a successful integrated design process by prioritizing appropriate collaborative meeting formats and activities. Under 2020, we're offering a little more guidance and asking for more accountability to encourage success by requiring that a new collaborative meetings template be completed and submitted for certification. And under 1.4, it's always necessary to communicate project priorities and collaborate effectively with the practitioners who are on the site. So now through our requirement of 1.4, we're asking teams to be more intentional and develop an explicit education plan to ensure those on site understand their role in achieving the project objectives. And for certification, we'll look to see your project's education plan. And then our newest addition to integrative design, which I'm really excited about, is this optional measure 1.7 cultural resilience. And this criterion really ties this category together and further enables developers to integrate community and resident participation in the development processes so that the built environment honors cultural identities, resident voices, and community histories. This helps build social cohesion, health, and equity for the residents of your project. So like I mentioned before, integrative design is really the backbone of the criteria. It helps teams understand the community context and environmental considerations when developing your project. And having this foundation of knowledge can then help ensure compliance with our location and neighborhood fabric category, which is category 2. And really, so with this one, as we live the increasing impacts of climate change, it's imperative to conserve natural resources, protect ecosystems, and reduce flooding while developing affordable housing. In addition to natural resource conservation, this category has also provided strategies for teams to focus on providing access to amenities for the residents of your project. We've made some significant changes to the mandatory requirements for rural projects in this category. So I'm going to focus on some of those larger updates. Starting off with 2.1, sensitive site protection. So our 2020 criteria now includes more specific requirements for limiting development to curtail impacts on sensitive lands. And to frame this work, we're now designating these sensitive lands as ecological resource protection zones, or ERPs as we like to call them. So we're now asking you all to develop with a sharper focus on 4 ecological features. One is limiting new development within the 100-year floodplain, conserving and protecting aquatic ecosystems, avoiding developing in areas that contain habitat for plant and animal species identified as threatened or endangered, and also conserving agricultural soils by protecting prime farmland, unique farmland, and farmland of statewide or local importance. And with ERPs in mind, you are now required to document, the site with an ERPs map. As you can see, here's an example of an ERPs map. And the reason why we are including this as part of our requirements now is this helps both your project team and us understand the ecological features that are present on your site at the start of the development process, which then enables your team to more sensitively develop, which is aimed at reducing harmful impacts on the environment. An ERPs map will enable clear understanding and effective communication about the project site by specifically documenting boundaries of these areas on the site plan, and to clearly illustrate if any ERPs fall inside the perimeter of the site, to determine if any features on site must be treated sensitively to ensure that there is no disturbance, disruption, or damage. And more broadly, it will encourage awareness around the ERPs features and the familiarity with the practice of documenting these to foster sensitive development processes in the long term. Moving on to, so that's really focused on, well, 2.1 and 2.3 and 2.4 are really focused on resource efficiency of the land as well. As building more densely means that there will be less detrimental impacts to the land. Design plays a major role in building more densely and can help achieve compliance under 2.1. For rural projects without zoning requirements, you must build to at least 5 units per acre for single-family homes, 10 units for multifamily buildings that are single and 2 stories, and 15 units per acre for multifamily buildings greater than 2 stories. 2-4s are optional measure where your team can earn additional points. And for rural teams, you can do that by building to 7.5 units per acre for single family, 12 units per acre for single and 2-story multifamily buildings, and 20 units per acre for multifamily buildings greater than 2 stories. So aside from more efficient use of the land, building more densely can ensure residents are within a reasonable distance of amenities and services. This leads us to mandatory criterion 2.5, where rural projects are required to locate their project within 5 miles of at least 4 services. The services are listed in our criteria manual and on our site that Krista shared with you earlier, but they span from food access to education and culture, and retail and retail and other amenities as well. Continuing on the theme of access, 2.6 is required of all rural projects to set aside at least 10% of the total project acreage as permanent open space that is accessible to all residents, or you can locate the project within a 1/4 mile walking distance of public open space that is open and accessible to all residents. And providing access to safe open space for residents really allows for a higher quality of life while promoting physical activity and social interaction amongst the broader community. And then the other 2 criteria that I really wanted to point out are 215A and 215B, which is our newest addition to this category as well, access to broadband. So as I said, these criteria are brand new to 2020, and it really branches out from the physical structures of connectivity to offering broadband services. In 2015, we required rural projects to comply with our access to transportation requirement. And as we were updating the criteria for 2020, we removed all the requirements for rural projects to be near transit. So now we've replaced that requirement for with these 2 criteria. And this really ensures that residents have access to broadband, which also allows them to have access to other services, really important services such as telemedicine and online job opportunities. And as we are learning from COVID, broadband provides even more access to education. 215A is required of all new construction and sub-rehab projects in rural parts of the country, and ensures that the property is being designed for broadband, so when the service becomes available in the community, the property can be easily connected. And 2.15B is the optional measure where you can earn points and requires that all units and common and amenity spaces have broadband internet access with at least a speed of 25 megabits per second for downloading and 3 megabits per second for uploading. So now moving from understanding the community and potential residents to providing access and understanding the present environmental considerations on your site, we're now moving to guidance to improving those conditions through our site improvement category. This category has remained pretty consistent between 2015 and 2020. However, there are a few notable updates and call-outs specific to rural projects. The first one, minimization of disturbance during staging and construction. So compared to 2015, 3.2, we updated the title from erosion and sedimentation control to be more specific about the timeline it takes to build something. We removed the exemption for the infill sites and wanted to be more explanatory and expansive as to what we are including in the requirement. 3.2 is focused on ensuring that topsoil isn't disturbed, which helps reduce stormwater runoff and the sedimentation and pollution of local waterways that may be caused by construction debris. by protecting healthy soils and remediating compaction, minimizes the adverse effects of construction activities. Compacted soils are less able to absorb water and resist plant root penetration and lack the porosity needed for adequate aeration. So for this mandatory criterion, we require project teams working on sites larger than 1 acre to implement the EPA's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems, stormwater discharges from construction activities guidance, or the local requirements, whichever is more stringent. And we also include guidance for sites that are less than 1 acre now, as I mentioned before, and that ranges from stockpiling high quality topsoil to protecting ERPs, if you recall from category 2, to providing swales to divert surface water from hillsides. The complete list is in our manual, and I encourage you all to check that out as you're going through. And then 3.3 is ecosystem services and landscaping. This criterion really is pushing folks to think about the ecosystem services provided by the living landscape of the property. Soil and vegetation absorb and purify stormwater, trees create shade and help regulate climate, and plants capture particulate matter and sequester carbon to help moderate climate and reduce air pollution. This is mandatory if you're planning to provide landscaping and requires that all plantings be native or climate appropriate for the region and to not introduce any invasive species, plant species. And while ecosystem services help you think about the landscape and how soil and vegetation purify stormwater, moving on to 3.4, it focuses on managing that stormwater. So surface stormwater management was optional in 2015, and it's now required for new construction projects and rehabs greater than or equal to 5,000 square feet. We updated this requirement to reflect using percentiles as defined by the EPA. We feel that this really aligns with other sustainability programs. And then the second big change that we made is that this is mandatory for new construction and rehab projects. And this really helps recognize that all projects have some requirement and authority for managing the surface stormwater. And then moving on to our last two criterion of this category, 3.6 and 3.7, which is efficient irrigation and water use. So for those of you who will be utilizing landscaping and ecosystem services as indicated in 3.4, and providing permanent irrigation, you are required to install an efficient irrigation system. Installing an efficient irrigation system helps reduce overwatering and evaporation, which means your plantings can thrive during times of drought, all while conserving water and reducing atmospheric water vapor. 3.7 is our optional measure, so you can earn points under this criterion, and you have the opportunity, and you can do this by using an irrigation water system with a water sense label, or reusing at least 50% of the site's irrigation from sources such as treated gray water. There are a few more options in this list in our criteria manual, and I strongly encourage you all to check that out as well. So these are the major updates to category 3. We will now turn our attention to the first category that focuses on the physical structure of the building, which is water. So in the past, we have traditionally focused this category on water conservation. In 2020, we updated the criteria to also include water quality and changed the name to only water. So as I'm sure, sorry, I got a little lost for a second. So realizing that more water conserving fixtures doesn't necessarily equate to more water conservation, we updated our water conservation criteria to be more flexible in achieving greater conservation through a calculator approach. We updated the 2020 water calculator to take potential residents into consideration when developing your water conservation strategy. And now all projects will be required to reduce water consumption by at least 20% compared to baseline. However, we are still requiring that all fixtures, where applicable, be WaterSense labeled. And our newest addition to this category is our water quality criterion, as I was mentioning before. And this criterion offers 3 focus areas. One is to replace lead service lines, which is mandatory for sub-rehab projects built before 1986. Excuse me. Developing a Legionella water management program to be included in the operating manual under 8.1. This is required for multifamily buildings with either a cooling tower, hot water system, or more than 10 stories in height. And then our optional measure for all projects, which is testing water from dwelling unit faucets. So for those buildings that are served by private wells, testing water from faucets, you can also test water from faucets for nitrates, arsenic, and coliform bacteria and remediate as indicated in the criteria manual. So even though the quality of drinking water has been tightly regulated in the United States, there are still vulnerable populations with frequent exposure to sources of lead. Adding this criterion to our water category further ensures that the people we serve have safe drinking water. And that about wraps me up for categories 1 through 4. I want to thank you for listening to me go over this. And if we have a minute or two, perhaps I can take a quick question or two.
We did have one question that came across in the
Great.
chat. The question is from Greg Montgomery, and his question is, what is the baseline for water consumption?
Good question. So actually in our criteria manual, we use, I'm sorry, Krista, can you remind me where we got that table from? It's
Yeah, the baseline is average usage of water in homes across America. That's put together by a combination of the American Water Works Association and USGBC. So that's the comparison baseline.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Krista also shared, I'll make sure it goes out to all the attendees as well. She'll share a water savings calculator as well. So I'll get that in chat for y'all too.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions for right now.
Fantastic. So I will pass it over to Krista, who will round us out with the remaining categories.
Great. Thanks so much, Frederick. So Frederick talked about integrative design and then where you're locating your building with location and neighborhood fabric, and then what you're doing with your site with site improvements, and then what you're doing with water. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about energy usage, materials, healthy building strategies, and then operations and maintenance. So with this first area, I'll speak about category 5, which is operating energy. We include a number of different characteristics of construction in this category to try to bring down the amount of energy and the amount of emissions associated with the energy that you're using. In the US, residential and commercial buildings account for about 40% of energy consumption across the country. And so we have a real opportunity to make a difference here and save money and make the air cleaner at the same time. So with the 2020 criteria, you can just see the list of the names of the criterion that are in this category on this slide. And from 5.1a down to 5.5b, that's what we're calling our path to zero. And all of those strategies have to do with the amount of energy that you're using or the type of energy that you're using. And then 5.6, 5.7, and 5.8 have to do with what you're putting inside of the building that will use energy. And then 5.9 and 5.10 are about ensuring that you have resilience planning around your energy systems. So some of these are mandatory, some of them are optional. What I'm going to highlight for you right now is that first chunk, 5.1a through 5.5b, that's we're calling our path to zero. So there are 3 strategies on this path to zero energy. The first thing that you can think about is reduce how much energy you're using in your property by energy efficiency strategies. Next, you can think about the actual type of energy that you're using in your property, whether it's renewable source or not. And then the third thing that you can do to go on this path to zero is reduce a building's emissions embodied in the materials that you're using to construct your property. We touch on that in a different category, but this path to zero includes reducing energy and thinking about the type of energy that you're using. So the orange criteria that you see here on the far left are mandatory. The rest are optional. So you use 5.1A if you're new, you use 5.1B if you're a rehab. So if you're new construction, you're using 5.1A. This asks you to certify your property to Energy Star. That can be the manufactured homes version of Energy Star, or the certified homes version of Energy Star, or the multifamily new construction version of Energy Star, or the multifamily high-rise version of Energy Star. But it's a version of Energy Star. 5.1B for the rehabs doesn't require Energy Star certification, but you'll be doing some energy modeling so that you can set a target for reducing your emissions and energy usage, and then you'll be doing some commissioning to confirm that you've met that. And then it's up to you about how much farther along this path to zero you'd really like to go. So you can further reduce the amount of energy that you're using and get points in the program through 5.2A or B for that. You can think about using renewables and get points for that in 5.3A or B. You can be designed to be zero energy, 5.4, or you can think about going to electrification with 5.5A and B. If you choose to go to zero energy with 5.4, or if you achieve aggressive levels of energy reduction through 5.2B, you'll be earning our newest level of certification, Certification Plus, which recognizes the highest level of energy performance in our program and the highest level of certification that you can achieve. So that's a snapshot of category 5. I'm going to move on now to category 6. So this is materials. And thinking about material selection and installation and reuse in terms of thinking about how those actions impact the health of your residents and staff and impact the environment will have positive ramifications. So here's the list of criterion names that are in this category. And you can see some are about material selection, and then others near the end with construction waste management and recycling storage are about really the end of life of materials. So if you've used the Green Communities criteria in the past, you'll recognize some new things in this category. The first 3 items, ingredient transparency, recycled content, and chemical hazard optimization, are new and they're optional. So this is a new approach to material selection so that we're encouraging teams to think about choosing materials that actually provide information about how they will impact the health of the people who live or work in the building. Then 6.4 and 6.5 get into the real details of material selection and have mandatory items. And then the others are about installation techniques. So I'm gonna go in a short deep dive into 6.4, healthier material selection. And what you see on your screen here is just a screenshot of the table that we have in this criterion. And if you have the opportunity to go to the website and look at 6.4, you'll see that there are different rows for different types of materials. So this first row that you see here is about interior paints, coatings, primers, and wallpaper. There's a mandatory element about how you should spec these products. And then there's an optional aspect. If you'd like to earn optional points, there are opportunities for that here. And the same applies to several different product categories. I wanted to highlight that for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to category 7, which is about healthy living environments. This is one of our largest categories, and we recognize that the decisions that you make in design and construction and operations will impact the health of your residents, whether or not you mean it to or not. And so the strategies that we have in here are designed to help make that impact a positive one. And here you can see the list of the names of the different criteria that we have in this category. And you can see that we've broken it into 3 different themes. The first one is about reducing exposure to hazards. the second one about managing the indoor environment, and then the last one is actually about how you design the building and how that impacts the health of the people who live or work in that building. So this first section about hazards, many of these I'm sure you'll be familiar with generally, about radon and lead control, combustion safety, etc. One new change I'd like to call your attention to is to check out criterion 7.6 when you have a little bit more time. We've made some significant changes to the smoke-free policy criterion in the program. It's now mandatory for all projects to implement a smoke-free policy in all common spaces in your building. Not all residential spaces, but all common spaces. And you can see the guidelines for specific recommendations about how to approach that. And then I'd like to also just call your attention to that last threesome at the end here, the promoting health through design. You're required in the program to implement at least one of these three measures, and it's up to you to decide which one would be more meaningful for your project team. And we're really excited about these three. I think the last one in particular, healing-centered design, is based upon emerging research about trauma-informed design solutions, and we're excited to see this implemented more broadly. So now I'm going to go on to the last category, category 8, operations, maintenance, and resident engagement. So everything else that we've talked about so far is about design and construction. And this category is about how do we make sure to translate all of that intention and great work into the life of the building when it's being operated. So here I've got the list of the criterion names in this category. We have plans for operating and maintaining the building for staff, and guidance for residents about the different characteristics that are in the building that and how they can contribute to sustainability and healthy living. And then for the very last criterion here is energy and water data collection and monitoring. So this is about benchmarking your utility usage so that you can respond to the operating conditions of your property. And I've pulled a screenshot of this criterion to share with you just to highlight that there are 4 different methods that we've included in this criterion now. And really the bottom line is for you to pick the method that matches with what your utility provider actually can share with you, and then share that with us. So that's one of the biggest changes in this category that I wanted to highlight. So I think that wraps it up for a highlight tour of the last 4 categories of 2020. And the last thing I would just share is that through our development of the 2020 criteria, we worked closely with hundreds of partners, but one of our key partner organizations was the International Well Building Institute. They run the WELL certification program. And through the development process, we're really pleased to announce that any project that certifies to the 2020 criteria will automatically also earn WELL certification. And this is the only green building program which has that distinction. So wanted to share that with you.
So Krista, I think that leads really well into one of the questions we got through the Q&A.
Okay.
It's from Ella Mitchell, and she's saying that she's totally new to this program, and is it essentially an affordable housing specific equivalent to LEED or Greenpoint rated, and what are the advantages to using Enterprise Green Communities versus those other programs?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, Green Communities, LEED, Greenpoint rated, Earthcraft, the National Green Building Standard. There are many different green building programs that are available for project teams to choose from if they'd like to use. What distinguishes Green Communities on the one hand is that it is designed exclusively and explicitly for the affordable housing sector. So we've designed it with and for the affordable housing development community. So you'll see different aspects of that reflected throughout. I think you can also recognize in some ways that this program, more so than some of the other national green belt or regional green building programs, does emphasize healthy housing to a greater degree than many of the others. And I think our program has more mandatory criterion, still has a lot of optional pathways, but based on feedback that we've gotten from the development community, they wanted to know, what do I do? And so, rather than having an endless option of pathways. So that's also included here, but happy to provide more information about that. Or you can go to our website also, actually, and see different comparison narratives between this program and other green building programs out there.
Right, and I think you started answering this question, but we had a question about, have we changed the required optional and mandatory point kind of guidelines with this new rollout?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did increase the number of optional points that you need to get to certify by 5 points. And that's partly because we have so many more optional criterion you can choose from. And even if a criterion existed in our last iteration and this one, they might not have exactly the same number of optional points. We reweighted the points that are associated with all of the optional criterion with stakeholders this year.
Okay, great, Mary. And if that didn't answer your question, let me know in the chat so that we can further build on that. And then we have one question from Greg Montgomery. He was asking why Energy Star, and then he's saying that on his project they decided not to pursue Energy Star certification because of a technical requirement with the rage hood ventilation in Energy Star, and how the recirculation hoods made it hard for envelope closure. So just maybe has that come up, or why are you marrying certain pieces of it to Energy Star? If you can explain that for us.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's in our program, it's for the new construction projects coming through that are required to certify to Energy Star as a part of certifying to green communities. And the reason that we've gone that route is because it is a national infrastructure and framework that has built in networks of energy professionals around the country and layers of quality assurance over those individuals to work to ensure that homes are not only like modeled and designed to meet a certain threshold, but actually verified on site to meet that threshold too. So it's really a measure of quality assurance for us that we can count on that Energy Star network and all of its checks and balances is meeting. For the bit about ventilation, we also, even separately from Energy Star in our program, have a requirement about ventilation, and really consider that it's a crucial strategy to include, especially for new construction projects, even though in some ways it is an energy penalty, but it's beneficial for the health impacts. So happy to follow up offline individually about different strategies that have worked for other teams if that seems to be problematic in a case that you're running into right now.
Great, and then we've got a few other questions that have come in. From Ella Mitchell, have you found that there are any factors that make a development not a good fit for the program? E.g., certain specific constraints that make it difficult to meet the criteria?
I'll share two things, and then Frederick, you might have other thoughts too. But the first thing I wanted to share is that we've eliminated one major barrier for rural projects. And that barrier was, as Frederick mentioned, the requirement for all projects, urban, rural, whatnot, to be within a certain location of public transit. And we got rid of that in the 2020 criteria for rural projects. So we're hoping to see more of you all join us in this pathway. Then the other thing that I was just going to mention is that, you know, as I showed on that filter in the beginning, we have a slightly different nuance for the criterion depending on if you're new construction, substantial rehab, or moderate rehab. Not all moderate rehabs will really be able to comply if their scope of work is just very small, because the limiting factor usually comes in with our energy efficiency requirements. So if you are replacing your roof, if you're replacing a major heating system, if you're doing some system replacement work in your rehab, you'll likely be able to have the type of scope opportunities to comply. But if you're just doing a straight preservation deal, or if you're just replacing carpets and cabinets, you likely won't be able to meet all of the requirements in the program. Otherwise, though, we think there's a pathway for everybody to join in.
Great, and I have a question from Tracy Prince at BDT. For projects in the rural areas, are there any funding for green materials? It has become expensive to put certain green components into projects in rural areas versus urban, and to have those pieces built in order to meet the criteria, for example, for tax credits. So we're asking if you have any suggestions for that, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to put a link in the chat just for one type of resource. It's not a financial resource necessarily, but the Healthy Building Network runs a program called Home Free, and they specialize in looking at healthy green materials and they also, so they rank different materials on whether or not they're healthy and efficient and green, and their cost and the ease of installation. So I think that's a great resource to look at to maybe identify some maybe different types of products that maybe you're not using that might be a good fit for your project. The other thing that Home Free is doing is partnering with different bulk purchasing schemes, scheme in a positive way, to bring the cost down for purchasing some of those materials. But that's the first resource that comes to mind right now.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to call attention to some discussion in the chat. Lauren Westmoreland, another enterpriser on our team, shared a link for us so that you could see the comparisons between the Green Communities criteria and other programs like LEED and Greenpoint Rated. And then you've got, Krista also just shared that Home Free Healthy Building Network link as well. So take a look at the chat too if you're interested in those resources. Anyone else have any questions right now for our Green Communities team and the experts while we have them? If not, I might have, I have one question. It kind of goes back, Frederick, to the conversation about the, I think you were calling them ERPs, but the environmental assessments around projects. What if you have like a HUD environmental, do these, does it create an extra requirement, or can it be part of like HUD environmental review or other work that you're already doing on the project?
Yes, I believe the ERPS map itself will use a site plan, and it should and correct me if I'm wrong, Krista, but I believe it should align with what HUD would accept as well, if I'm understanding the question properly.
So another way that I'm thinking about it too is that the ERPS process is not like a site assessment in order to figure out if you're on a brownfield, for instance, or in order to determine like what types of contaminants or pollutants are on your site. It's not like a phase 1 environmental assessment. It's a lot simpler. It's a lot more straightforward. And on the screen here is that map that Frederick shared a minute ago. And he went over those 4 different characteristics of the land in terms of like natural features. So like wetlands and farmland, etc., that we want to try to not build upon if possible. So like in this example that you can see, even if you can't read all the words really clearly, if you see that light blue piece on the bottom right, side of the screen, that's just indicating where the 100-year floodplain is on this property. And we're going to be trying to avoid development in that area. So the ERPS map is not really the same as a phase 1 assessment, but that comes up. You can use the HUD phase 1 environmental assessments in a different part of the criteria.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure there's not two. That's the part I think sometimes is confusing if you have 2 different layers of sort of similar information. So thanks for clarifying. And we have one more question. Do you know of any green funding or community training and resource centers that provide green funding?
Yeah, so, that is often most easily answered at the local level. So depending on where you are in the country, there are different resources available to you. Sometimes, one useful place to start would always be checking in with your utility provider to see what kind of rebate programs they might have available for different for paying for your energy audit or your commissioning, or some of the systems that you'll be installing. And then most cities, have a Department of the Environment in their city government, and that can also be useful to look to see what kind of programs they have there. I'm not thinking of other programs right now that are explicitly designed for rural locations.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky conversation as we get into rural, because those cities and towns don't often have,
Yeah.
an environmental department, or somebody who really champions that within the infrastructure, just because of their smaller size and their smaller infrastructure within those cities and towns. So I think it's an important thing for us to elevate on the rural, conversation. Thank you guys so much. I know we're at the top of our hour, and really appreciate you lending your expertise to this conversation. And I think there's a lot more kind of conversation for us to have between our rural partners and how Green Communities works in the field, especially as 2020 criteria rolls out and has some differences from our previous criteria. So I'd really like to encourage anyone who's taking part to reach out to me or to reach out to Krista and Frederick with questions, because I intentionally, our idea is really to help promote safe, decent, affordable places to live. We want in a way that is environmentally appropriate and sustainable. But we also want to hear what the obstacles are to implementing these programs, so that we can make this tool more useful to you out in the field. So, and I think Frederick gave an email to reach out to, and of course you can reach out to the rural team through Adrian was the person who contacted registration, or also to myself, Robin Wolf. So thank you all for participating, and have a great rest of your day. Bye all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.